all sorts of red cards. We've seen Firemind's Foresight in that slot, some removal spells. Karanos, the god you just alluded to, not really interested in turning on the devotion requirement, just as another powerful finisher for a control deck.
Yeah, and this will be interesting. So the devotion decks have traditionally struggled, the green devotion decks have struggled with Supreme Verdict as a card. You know, they are full of mana creatures. They need to build this critical mass, and Verdict is very good against that. But we'll see if he can just power his way through it anyway.
So Jared, unlike Osip's list, Osip was touching a little bit of white for Banishing Light and Ajani, Mentor of Heroes. Jared, on the other hand, touching red for the more classic Domri Rad.
And just Domri Rad, nothing else. Otherwise, it's just green.
Yes.
So we see a start from Zack Canner of 2 lands. He shocks for the second land. That's for Sacred Foundry, possibly representing an Azorius Charm. I wouldn't think you'd shock for that, though. Maybe a Syncopate of sorts. But anyway, Boettcher just plays a Temple and swings with the Mystic. Mystic is going to get Is It Charmed. And that was the spell and another Elvish Mystic down.
Yeah, so 2 points there. Zack hoping maybe to get a Planeswalker that he could tag there with the Is It Charm. Instead, just going to kill the Elf.
Yeah, and that would be the reason to hold it up as opposed to just killing the Elf on site.
Yeah, Planeswalker is, of course, going to be one of Jared's most powerful tools in the matchup for playing a long game.
And speaking of Planeswalkers, Jared's going to try for one on turn 3. This is Domri Rod. An Is It Charm would take care of it, but a Syncopate would not. Zack has neither. Domri resolves +1s, but does not draw a card. And Jared continues with some Elvish Mystic beats. It's interesting that the swing with Elvish Mystic there is not very respectful. Like, he's not playing around the Azorius Charm at all.
Yeah, I think that he wanted to Domri first to draw a mana creature to know if he should cast that or just attack with the Elvish Mystic. But it is not the best play in terms of playing around Azorius Charm if that's something on your radar. Although a lot of these 3-color lists have just started cutting Azorius Charm either altogether or down to, say, 2 copies because they just need room for more spells of substance.
That's true, and Canner actually doesn't have any. So the game going pretty quick here. The Domri Rod was hit by a Banishing Light. Canner then played a 4th land, leaving 4 up. Boettcher swinging with Elvish Mystic and plays Voyaging Satyr, but no other Planeswalkers on the battlefield, and will pass back over to Canner.
It's unclear if Jared either has nothing powerful to do or is just worried about playing into counter spells, but he needs to play at a slightly faster pace than this because the threat of Sphinx's Revelation just looms over all of these games. If you wait too long, then it doesn't matter what you have left over. It's just going to be hit with counter spells and sweepers.
Yeah. Canner, not sure if he has a Revelation. He does have an Aetherling in hand, so he can try to end the game a more traditional way. But he is taking 2. Mana creature beats are continuing. But you're right, Boettcher has not committed a card of substance. It looks like he has a lot of lands here. And he'll go for Polukranos, World Eater. And that one should get a removal spell from Canner, I would think. And it draws out a Syncopate. Now, your thoughts here, it drew out a Syncopate. He had a Detention Sphere in hand as well, but he's opting to, like, how do you feel like Canner wants to, like, when I'm playing this, how does Canner want to line up his removal spells? I'd be inclined to, like, I want to counter the Garruk and D-Sphere the creatures.
I can respect, if that was Dissolve, I think you're totally right. And I think your play still might be better. Syncopate's window might be closing here to be relevant. So I think Zack may want to just cash it in a spot where he knows it's going to do something productive, which is getting rid of that Palakranos.
Yeah, well, Zack finally feeling the pressure. He makes Elspeth Sun's Champion. He makes 3 tokens. This is the beats have brought him all the way down to 11. He decides to put an end to that. It does open him up for a turn where Jared gets to resolve something. And he has nothing to resolve. Boettcher scoops it in, and game 1 goes to Zack Canner.
Yeah. Jared pretty clearly had nothing going on that game besides his 1 Planeswalker, and not going to try to slog through that Elspeth.
Yeah, and that seems like a little bit of a weaker hand on Boettcher's side. He did have a Nykthos, he did have some early mana creatures, and a Domri, but, as we said before, these green-red Devotion decks do not have too much of substance. In some matchups, I think that Polukranos would really be a substantive card. In the blue-white control matchup, I don't feel like it is so much.
And I think that right there is the tilt on when green Devotion has a good matchup or a bad matchup. In the matchups where Palakranos is another significant threat, I think green Devotion's quite good because then it has the density necessary to be good, to have enough threat cards. In the matchups where Palakranos is a blank, then I think the matchup is generally quite bad for green Devotion.
Right. Yeah, and so what Jared's going to try to do, game 2, is he'll try to get more cards of substance. So let's go ahead and look at his sideboard and see if what he actually has here for that.
He has a Consigned to Dust, 2 copies of Xenagos to Reveler, 3 copies of Mistcutter Hydra, an Arbor Colossus, 2 Tactics, 2 Mortars, and 4 copies of Nylea's Disciple. So Mistcutter Hydra and Xenagos, I believe, pretty classic anti-control cards.
Yeah, Mistcutter, Xenagos, those are cards that can replace I guess, some of the more do-nothing style cards. You know, he does have Arbor Colossus in the main. He does have, like, some number of mana creatures that I imagine he'd want to board out in this matchup just because Supreme Verdict looms so large. How do you feel about Consigned to Dust? Now, normally I've seen Unravel the Aether in that spot, but Consigned to Dust is a pretty interesting choice.
Yeah, well, what do you think the merits are of playing this card in lieu of something like you mentioned, like Unravel?
Well, it's greedier, first of all. So, I mean, Consigned to Dust is a 3-mana disenchant that basically you can replicate as many times as you want. For it to be better than Unravel, you'd have to assume that there's a chance that you're going to get two cards with it.
And I think that's reasonable. And, you know, in the Green Devotion decks in these post-board games, they do go fairly long. Quite often. I mean, you know, you have a lot of threatening cards, so the control player is trying to sit back on their heels. Their Detention Spheres are a little overloaded. And any draw involving Nykthos, you're probably going to have enough mana to potentially tag 2 targets. The bigger question is, how much does saving the 1 mana matter in the matchups where you could have Unravel? If the answer is it doesn't matter very much, then the upside of being able to hit multiple things is huge.
Right, so it may just be, and I think that to me sounds like the point. He probably never expects to, I know it's strive it still feels like to strive or replicate it. Multi-kicker it, all of the above. Yeah, I don't think he expects to do it too often, but you're right, if there's a situation that he can, he's not losing much.
Yes. But yeah, I think you're going to see that card come in alongside the Xenagos and the Mistcutter Hydra.
Now, unfortunate for Boettcher, as on Canner's side, he has shown up today wanting to beat mana creature decks. He has, in addition to his 4 Supreme Verdicts in the main, he has the ability to board into 3 Anger of the Gods in this matchup, which to me seems just incredible in the matchup.
It's Supreme Verdicts 5 through however many.
Yeah.
That's a really nice element that the blue-white-red control decks have that Esper or blue-white control does not have. They can bring in Nyx Fleece Ram, not that I think it's coming in this matchup, it's not that kind of matchup, but you get to bring in Nyx Fleece Ram alongside Anger of the Gods and just crush those kind of decks. Like we've seen Red Devotion do with Frostburn Weird alongside Anger of the Gods.
Sure.
So it's another Wrath effect that it can be very good in this matchup and is also incredible alongside Nyx Fleece Ram if you happen to run into really linear aggro decks.
Yeah. Among other weapons that I think Canner might use, he has a pair of Negates, which I actually like a decent amount in this matchup. Like, if I'm Canner, the cards I worry about in this matchup would be, well, first and foremost, Garruk, Caller of Beasts. Can't let that resolve. I don't even want him to activate it once, so I don't even, I want an answer that's not Detention Sphere to it. I'd want, hopefully, an answer to Domri, and I'd want to be able to sweep the board many times if I have to.
Negate in these matchups is pretty interesting to me. It's one of those matchups kind of like Judd Monsters or Green-Red Monsters where there aren't that many spells in the deck, but the spells are their most powerful cards.
Right. And it's like you can't you really don't want a Garruk to resolve. The last thing is he has to make sure he still has outs to Mistcutter Hydra. He, of course, has his Supreme Verdicts. But I mean, because he's playing blue-white-red, that deck actually tends to be a little soft to Mistcutter Hydra. They do play Turnburn, that obviously can't deal with Mistcutter. Oftentimes they don't they have Banishing Light as an answer to it, and that sometimes is it. He has 1 War Leader's Helix, which could answer it maybe.
Yeah, I think you're going to probably see the Blind Obediences come in as some sort of concession to that card.
Yeah, traditionally a blue-white deck would have Celestial Flare, and an Esper deck would have a Doomblade. We are underway for game 2, both players on 7. Boettcher starts out on a Temple. He's deciding on the Scry. It's going to be to the bottom. Looks like he does have Burning Tree Emissary and Nykthos in his opener, so he could have a fairly explosive draw. I'm not sure what he has to ramp into yet.
Yeah, the tough part is all these draws get undone potentially by a single Supreme Verdict. So even though Jared has the potential to be very explosive in this game, he's still going to want to measure his threats because he has to worry quite a bit about Supreme Verdicts.
So he plays second Temple and Elvish Mystic. He does have a Domri Rod that he can set up for. Canner with 2 mana will pass back the turn. And I imagine he's going to Boettcher will try to stick the Domri. He drew a second Nykthos for the turn.
Yeah, he can play around Syncopate here, so.
Play around Syncopate. Negate would be the card that gets him. And he's going to start with Burning Tree Emissary. See if that works. So looks like he's going to try to get some bonus. Well, it wouldn't be bonus mana off of Nykthos. He'll go play Caryatid, then Nykthos, then swing. So he's playing right into the possibility of a Supreme Verdict as opposed to resolving the Domri.
He may be willing to have these kind of cards loss in a Supreme Verdict if it means he gets to untap and resolve the Domri, because the possibility of negate is still there last turn.
Yep. And just a temple for Canner. Goes back over to Boettcher's side. He does have a Garruk Caller of Beasts in hand, so right now he could make Garruk this turn. If he has another land, which he does, he can tap for Nykthos for 4, play Nykthos for 6, have 7, 8 mana, and play Garruk with 2 up.
And I like that play a lot because Jared may not get another shot at this. If he's looking at Supreme Verdict next turn, now Zack doesn't have double white yet, so maybe Jared's not super concerned about that possibility. He may get no other shot to resolve his Garruk.
Yeah.
Because if all his creatures are swept away, that's it.
So he still has enough to go for Garruk with Syncopate mana up, but he opts to do not Garruk or Domri here. He's just... So we'll see what the plan is. And now this is going to be an Anger of the Gods.
That is rough.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he doesn't have the Garruk. Maybe we were misreading that. There's a Xenagos in his hand. I believe there is a Garruk.
And that's a big upgrade that this list gets to make over, again, some other builds of control decks where your opponent is not used to getting swept away on turn 4. They're playing to develop their board for the first couple turns, get out in front of Supreme Verdict, and then that happens.
All right, so he's going to have to play and Legend Rule his own Nykthos to get that Xenagos in play. So he does have Xenagos and Domri. He's going for Xenagos there, even when he had the Domri. So Xenagos, to me, seems like it's the bigger prize.
Yeah, and, the way this game is going, Jared's just kind of got to go aggressive here. He's lost so many cards to that Anger of the Gods that I don't think that the card advantage provided by Domri is going to matter very much.
All right, Tension Sphere takes care of the Reveler, and Justice Satyr remains on the board for Boettcher. And no more lands. He's going to go ahead and go for Domri Rod. He does have Voyaging Satyr, Garruk Caller of Beasts in hand, and Courser of Krufix is shown off Domri.
So not a bad turn for Jared, but if you're Zack, you got to still be thrilled with the way this game's going so far.
Yeah, as long as Zack can answer the Domri, I mean, the game's Zack's life total is getting lower. He's at 10, but he still has some time. A Revelations to still be able to clear this up, and Canner still has lots of cards in his hand, including an Archangel of Thune, which he makes this turn.
Yeah, those Archangels are 2 copies in Zack's sideboard, trying to end the game quickly in certain spots. And now this is a really good position for it too. With his life total low and Jared a little bottlenecked on total resources.
There's a risk here. If Boettcher has kept in his Pelucranos, this could be a very difficult spot for Canner. He doesn't have the Pelucranos, or at least doesn't have the land for it. He's going to play Courser of Krufix for the turn, make a forest off the top.
That's the thing is, he knows that Zack knows that Jared's missing land. So it would have to be a land that turn and Palacranos.
Yeah. Draw a Caryatid, play an Elvish Mystic. Boettcher getting lots of card advantage there with that combo of Domri and Courser.
But it's not clear how much that card advantage is going to matter if it's all liable to get swept away at a moment's notice.
Right. I mean, Sphinx's Revelation always wins the card advantage fight.
Undefeated lifetime.
That's what that card really has done with Standard. Every other late game is kind of invalidated to a certain level, right? Because whatever you're doing, it's not as good as Sphinx's Revelation.
That's why I question when sideboards go overloaded with... Mono Black's a little bit different because of the hand disruption, but go overload with Underworld Connections, Erebos, God of the Dead. You're not beating those decks going long. You can stick one of those cards and they're still going to outdraw you. Got to be faster. If it's supplemented by discard or some tough-to-answer threats, those kind of grindier cards can be good, but in the abstract...
Erebos can try to go along with it. Erebos probably has the best shot of any of them.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, the card's very good.
It's a very overrated angle of attack, trying to out-card advantage them.
All right, so we're going to see what looks like an attempt at a pretty big Nykthos turn. He's going to start with a Burning Tree Emissary, but Canner will have none of that. He's going to go ahead and dissolve the Burning Tree.
I think Zack has another counter in hand, so he's just trying to set the stage to bleed out some resources, get rid of that Domri, maybe land the Karanos that's in his hand.
If you're Boettcher, does that mean, if I see a dissolve on that, I no longer believe that Canner has a sweeper?
Yes.
So now I'm going to start playing all my mana creatures. And Boettcher's doing exactly that. Plays Voyaging Satyr, plays Elvish Mystic. Yeah, he is at the mercy of a Supreme Verdict.
But that was already the case. I mean, his hand doesn't have the resources to fight through another sweeper, so.
Well, if he tapped out for the sweeper, he could resolve this Garruk. Like, he still has a Garruk left. Archangel takes out Domri. Canner goes up to 13. Archangel becomes a 5/6. And the cool part about, the strong part about Archangel right here is it's forcing Boettcher to do something in that it will race Boettcher's entire board.
Yes.
Stomping Ground, now the top card. Boettcher has the combo of Eidolon of Blossoms and Courser. It's going to shock for Stomping Ground. Puts him to 20, shows the next card. That's Polukranos, World Eater.
And Jared with pretty close to unlimited mana here with the Voyaging Satyr and the Nykthos in play. A lot of mana to work with.
4 mana for Eidolon of Blossoms. Will that resolve? We know Canner has 1 counter spell. We don't know if he has any more. And that'll get counterfluxed. So no Eidolon there. The Polukranos is going to remain on the top of the deck. Now he can try for the Garruk. The Garruk's just going to get taken down by Archangel. That's one of the worries here. So activating Nykthos. That's for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Untaps Nykthos, pays 3, and now he has 8, so he has 2 floating. He's going to go for Garruk with 2 floating, and that gets negated. And last 2 spent on the Caryatid. Swings for 4, Zack Canner down to 9.
And now, you know, Jared's getting this awkward spot where he might just lose the damage race outright to Archangel by itself and loses almost on the spot to any sweeper.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance that this Polukranos, we need to count through how much it's going to monster for. I'm not positive it can't fight the Archangel. So if he plays Polukranos, he'll have a devotion of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So Nykthos will tap for 6. He'll have access to 6, 12, 13, 14, 15 mana. He can monstrous Polukranos on 7. That's actually enough to kill Archangel of Thune. This next turn, he can cast Polukranos and monstrous it to kill Archangel.
It's quite impressive.
It's a lot of mana. It's a lot of mana. You got to count through it, because that's the kind of play which you wouldn't expect would work, but it does. No, he's got a... Oh, he's going to go for another Garruk instead here. So that first Nykthos activation was for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that was enough for the Garruk by itself.
Oh, boy.
Oh, well, maybe you don't even have to kill the Archangel. Maybe you can kill your opponent this turn.
Those 2 Mistcutter Hydras there maybe give Jared a different angle of attack here.
All right, 1, 2, 3. So if he untaps Nykthos, we'll just count it out here. He has
2, 3, 4,
1,
5,
2,
6,
3,
8
4.
devotion.
So that taps for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. He can make Mistcutter on 12 this turn, which that coupled with the Courser and Satyr swinging is lethal.
Yes. So, gonna put Zack to the test here.
Does he have it? And nope, that'll get him. So Jared Boettcher takes game 2 off the strength really of Voyaging Satyr Nykthos.
Yeah, and it calls into question, you know, how much you want Archangel in this kind of matchup where
if that can happen.
If you can connect several times and still just die.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Archangel, I would say that to me calls the card into question. You know, you want to have a matchup where that will win, what you just did there.
Yes. You stabilize, you sweat him on turn 3, you played an Archangel on turn 5. That should be good enough.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then that means that Archangel's probably inappropriate for the matchup.
Yeah, it's not. If it needs to be a finisher in the matchup, and it, as shown, it isn't.
Yeah. And it wasn't like Zack did nothing except cast an Archangel. His draw was quite good.
Yeah, he still had multiple counter spells for Boettcher's best cards. He had a Keranos. That never got to activate.
Didn't get to untap.
No, he never did anything.
And if you didn't have Blind Obedience in your deck before, I think after that game, you're also going to want to find some room for that one.
Yeah, I think you're going to want Blind Obedience. It's interesting. Blind Obedience, it seems it's just for Mistcutter Hydra. I don't know. So it would be for Mistcutters, and that's good, but it really doesn't do anything else. The incremental life gain, I don't feel like is particularly relevant in the matchup. So it depends just how cold you are to Mistcutters, I suppose. Like how much insurance you need against them.
Feels like quite a bit, especially if you're moving away from Archangel, which is one of your better tools at fighting Mistcutter Hydra.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So it's okay at fighting Mistcutter Hydra. I almost feel like the better way to fight Mistcutter Hydra is by sweeping the mana creatures. Like the reason Mistcutter was good there was because Jared could tap for 20 mana. I'm not positive how much it was the Mistcutter.
Well,
like say Jared just like Mistcuttered on 4 or 5, would that have won the game?
Possibly. I mean, that's the kind of game where Archangel is going to be good.
Yeah.
If against those sort of mid-range Mistcutter draws, but it's not unreasonable for the game to go down that road. I feel like.
All right.
A lot of it is just how many bad cards are there in Zack's deck that he can easily cut.
Sure.
With these kind of matchups, it feels like that's often what it's coming down to. So I think that you can comfortably cut, let's say, the Aetherling, the War Leader's Helix, the Elixir that's in his list.
Yeah, Turnburn and Deicide don't seem particularly strong to me either.
Maybe
Deicide's fine.
Yeah, I mean, the counter spells are good, obviously. There's not a lot of wiggle room in this list. Most of the cards feel pretty productive in this matchup. The Fated Retribution's very good here, I feel like.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you can just try to cut every win conditioner that isn't Elspeth. But then you run into other issues, potentially.
I mean, I think your real win condition in the matchup is Sphinx's Rev, in this one at least. There's some matchups where, like, you'd rather have a way to quickly win. I'm not positive that Canner needs to do that as opposed to just controlling.
Yes. Yeah, but there's a lot of different ways that Zack can try to approach this matchup. But after the second game, I would try to get away from the, try to win quickly, control the board, and win with a fast Archangel.
Yeah.
That got thrown for a loop after what happened there in game 2.
Yeah, there are no pithing needles in Canner's sideboard, so he does have to reactively answer all the planeswalkers. He can't. He has to counter them or sphere or banishing light them.
And maybe that's part of the reason that Zack wanted Archangel in the matchup too. He's a little soft to planeswalkers.
Sure, and Archangel did take out a Domri Rod that game.
Yeah.
And that was probably, I think, the biggest contribution it made.
Well, the damage it dealt, nor the life it gained mattered very much. So.
Right. It put a clock on Boettcher, but the clock didn't get there.
Boettcher beat it by several turns.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a turn away. It was.
Yeah, it was like 2 or
2 or 3. Yeah.
All right. Well, game 3 is underway. Canner is on the play. Starts out with a temple. Boettcher with a tapped land, and just some temples as Canner develops his mana base, waiting to react to Boettcher's first threat, which looks like it's going to be a mana creature of some sort, and that will be Voyaging Satyr for Boettcher.
Boettcher, especially on the draw, needs to be a lot more conservative with the way his threats get deployed here. Yeah. And especially now that he knows about Anger of the Gods being in play too.
We see so many mana creatures on his side. Boettcher on turn 3 goes ahead and goes for a Domri Rod. It's syncopate proof. Checks for the negate. Canner does not have it. Domri resolves. +1s, does not hit a creature, and Boettcher swings for 1. Really this is the second time I've seen Boettcher really not playing around Azorius Charm at all.
Since he had an Elvish Mystic in his hand that he elected not to cast, I agree that he should have Domried post-combat. But at this point, it's been 3 games. He's seen a lot of Zack's deck. There's been no Azorius Charm played. I think it just may be off Jared's radar at this point.
4th land for Canner, no spells yet. Boettcher pluses the Domri, misses, then swings with the Voyaging Satyr and adds an Elvish Mystic to his team. He did have the option of committing more mana creatures, but didn't on that turn.
Again, being aware of the possibility of any number of sweepers out of Zack's deck.
Yeah, 5th land from Zack, still no spells. Domri ticking up even higher. It's at 6 as this time it draws Boettcher and Elvish Mystic. And Zack's going to have to answer that Domri pretty soon.
Yeah, the Planeswalkers are Jared's most powerful angle of attack, in my opinion, post-board, just because there's so many sweepers. Zack hasn't shown a lot of ways to get them off the table, and they cause all sorts of headaches.
All right, and Boettcher's going to go for another Planeswalker. This is Xenagos the Reveler, and this one resolves as well. Now it adds a Satyr to the mix, and Boettcher attacks for 4.
We are now in the 5th turn of the game, and Zack finally plays his first spell.
Yeah, it's a Revelation for 2. Nothing that pretty expensive inspiration there. He draws another Revelation off it. And I want to say it's going to take... He's going to need a turn 7 Fated Retribution here.
It feels that way.
There's too many things on Boettcher's side.
Yeah, even Anger of the Gods doesn't really provide a lot right now. It's fine, but it's, doesn't really matter all that much.
Temple of Enlightenment keeps the card on top. Canner will cast Anger of the Gods that exiles Boettcher's team, but he still has the pair of Planeswalkers and Domri, who's gearing up to go Ultimate. And this time Domri draws Eidolon of Blossoms. The card advantage engine continues.
Another great way for Jared to keep developing if he wants to without playing further and further into sweepers.
Yeah, he'll go ahead and make that Eidolon. He's going to draw him a card into an Elvish Mystic.
And if you were watching this game and had to say who's the one with all the card drawing spells in their deck, you would say Jared in this game.
Yeah, Satyr made by Xenagos. Elvish Mystic made by Boettcher. He swings the Satyr. Canner takes 2, and yes, that has got to be the Fated Retribution, and it is.
All right, well, Zack has passed the first test.
Yeah, right on time. The Domri for 7 did not resolve. Everything hits the bin. Canner scries 2. All right. So Boettcher's going to have to reload. Fortunately, with all those cards he got there, this is going to be possible. He plays Domri, pluses it to 4, misses.
But this is exactly the kind of game where, Jared may be able to reassemble some of his card advantage, but it just might not matter in the face of all the resources that Zack can now bring to the table.
Well, yeah, Zack, as we remember, that first Revelation for 2 did draw another Revelation. So he's got that Revelation. We see now he makes an Elspeth on 6. And I think he has a Supreme Verdict as well. This looks very good for Canner.
Yeah. Jared now may have to commit a lot of resources just to protecting his Planeswalker, at which point Zack can just go ahead and, at his leisure, fire off a Revelation and probably bury Jared from there.
Yeah, if Zack can get far enough ahead on Revelation, he doesn't even have to worry about the Domri emblem.
Yeah.
We see there no answer for the Elspeth. Canner, clearly confident, shocks down to 12. Elspeth makes 3 more tokens.
The shock down to 12 with the 9th land or whatever it is, rarely a good sign for the other player.
Yeah, he's probably about to draw 6 cards. So Jared, if he doesn't want a large Revelation happening, he's going to have to cast something really good, something that demands a counter spell.
But at this point, not even Mistcutter Hydra qualifies.
Right. Canner would Revelation and then hope to Verdict it.
Yeah. Or just block it indefinitely with Elspeth tokens. I mean, there's not a lot to be done with it.
Nykthos made on Boettcher's side. He passes the turn, and here comes a Revelation for 6. Canner moves back up to 18, draws 6, and with 6 new cards and 6 Elspeth tokens, looks to be reaching that late game that is so difficult to answer from the control deck.
And the card you alluded to earlier, Fated Retribution, trying to play a little bit more proactively in this metagame because Detention Spheres and Blinding Lights are not stable as they once were, doing some incredible work for Zack in this game.
Yeah, and all 6 of the tokens swing at Domri. Jared's going to block and kill 2 of them. Domri drops down to 2. And the remaining 2 damage dealt to take care of Domri. 3 more tokens made by Elspeth. And only 1 died on the attack. 1 of them bounced off the carry. That brings his total up to 8 1/1s with a 7 loyalty Elspeth in play. Canner with more than 7 cards in hand. Scries 1 to the bottom.
We've seen this song and dance before.
Yep. Discards the Temple. He has a lot of removal spells. Boettcher with 2 cards in hand. Nothing going on.
Just confirming that it is a lethal attack next turn.
He'll scry.
We're close to it.
And he concedes there. So Zack Canner in 3 defeats Jared Boettcher. Canner moves up to 4-1, still in contention for the day. Boettcher down to 3-2.
Yeah, so Fated Retribution playing a critical role in that matchup. That was a spot where no other card really could